All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. My name's Cassidy Westron. I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the List Visual Arts Center. Tonight, you're joining us for a graduate student talk with Félix-Antoine Gélineau here. This is a series where we invite graduate students to expand on our exhibition using their expertise in a similar subject matter as a way to see how art and research are overlapping on MIT's campus. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Felix, a PhD candidate in philosophy at MIT. He explores questions at the intersection of epistemology, ethics, and metaethics. Before turning to philosophy, he studied music performance, an experience that sparked a lasting interest in aesthetics and the philosophy of art. In this talk, Felix will examine a question of the confluence of epistemology and the philosophy of art. How does an artwork's ability to enrich our perspectives relate to its artistic merit? He'll explore how artists, performers, such as the exhibition's orchestrators, and audiences collaborate in learning and sense-making through art. Along the way, Felix will also discuss whether the idea that artistic merit is influenced by what and how we learn from art is compatible with the view that art is valuable for its own sake. At the end, we'll have a Q&A where you'll have a chance to ask any questions you may have, and thank you so much for coming here and showing interest in our programming. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I start, I want to thank the staff at the List Art Center and Cassidy in particular for the invitation to give this talk, as well as for the technical and logistical support. I also want to thank Pedro Gómez-Egaña for the discussion and the insights he provided, and thanks so much to you for being here. And just a word of warning before moving into the talk. So when Cassidy reached out to me about the opportunity to give a talk here, she asked whether it would be possible to combine my research interests in aesthetics, and notably on aesthetic value, with my research interests in epistemology. It's something I'd never done before, but I accepted, and you will have to be the witness to this first attempt at marrying the two. So I want to start by bringing to the fore a certain tension between two aspects of our practice of artistic evaluation. So on the one hand, we praise works of art for being sources of understanding, of insight into ourselves, others, and the world. It seems that, all things being equal, a work's artistic merit increases in virtue of its ability to impart knowledge and understanding. But on the other hand, we don't really like when artworks tell us what we should think about things, and when they're being didactic, when they're commenting too obviously. So we often treat an artwork's being didactic as an artistic flaw. So there seems to be a tension there, because since an artwork's artistic merit is increased by its ability to impart cognitive values, so knowledge and understanding, and being didactic is an effective way to do so, it's puzzling why being didactic shouldn't be in itself an artistic merit, but it is itself treated as an artistic flaw. Say, I like my textbooks to be clear and to tell me what I should think about things, and I think their merit increases in virtue of being clear and didactic. So it's puzzling why this isn't the case in the case of artworks. So my aims today are twofold. So I aim to show that there's a genuine tension between these two aspects, and if you take only that from the talk, I'll have done some of what I want to achieve. The other aspect is to make some progress towards diffusing it. I remain ultimately agnostic on what I think the best solution is, but we'll explore a few. So first, I want to shore up each of the claims that are in tension. So it seems uncontroversial that we can learn from art. Many things, objects of knowledge and types of knowledge have been proposed. So moral knowledge, or we can learn about human nature or the human condition or human psychology, for instance, by reading novels. We can also gain phenomenal knowledge, that is, knowledge of what it's like to be in a certain situation, and this should enrich our ability to empathize with people who are in these situations. We can also gain not new factual knowledge, but a kind of conceptual knowledge, so develop new conceptual resources by which we can organize our world, and relatedly develop new perspectives on things. So art may make previously overlooked features of our life, or our world, others, salient, and help us conceive of them in a new light. So here, in this case, I want to bring your attention to Virgo, which disrupts our conception of the home. So it presents to us a domestic space that's shaped by interruption, by fragmentation, by movement, and by technology. And usually we think of the home as being a source of like safety, a place of safety where we can be ourselves. But instead, Virgo presents to us, or through Virgo, the home emerges as a deeply unsettling space. So a space that's marked by surveillance, by constraint, by unease, and by some kind of psychological burden. So that's the kind of insight that we can gain through art. And why I think that it matters artistically? Well, I think the best evidence we have to that is that it's largely attested by our practices of artistic evaluation. It's commonplace to talk about Shakespeare's plays and praise them for the depth of the insight that they provide into the human experience, or talk about Picasso's Guernica, making us acquainted, like on an emotional, like deeply, like gut level, with the horrors of war, or just a cursory glance at the art section from newspapers. Say, I have here an excerpt from the New York Times, the 100 best books of the 21st century, which talks about Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad as a profound revelation that bleeds truth, and it says that we readers of Whitehead's imaginary world can inherit the protagonist's courage. So we have here the moral knowledge, we have the kind of psychological knowledge that we talked about earlier, the knowledge about human nature. So here we have the idea that a work's artistic merit seems to be increased by its ability to impart knowledge and understanding. On the other hand, didacticism is widely treated as an artistic flaw. So when we think about like the classic advice of like creative writing is show, don't tell. Insofar as it holds, it seems to cover cases of didacticism. So the audience should gain knowledge and understanding by being made to see or feel a certain way, that rather than being explicitly presented with some information. Also, it seems often apt to criticize didactic works as preachy in virtue of their didacticism, even when the knowledge and understanding to be gained from them would be valuable. And here again, same page from the New York Times, we get a passage in which the writer is talking about Ishiguro's novel, Never Let Me Go. It says, is Ishiguro commenting on biotech, reproductive science, the cognitive dissonance necessary for life under late-stage capitalism? He'd never be so didactic as to tell you what lies at the heart of this beautiful book is not social satire, but deep compassion. So the implication here seems to be that if if the author had been didactic, the work would have been less artful or less valuable qua work of art. So here we have these two claims that are in tension. Now I want to move at two more or less successful attempts at a resolution. One, I think, should be clearly rejected. The other one, I'm more ambivalent towards. So the first one is the default theory of aesthetic value in like the 20th century aesthetics is aesthetic hedonism, which is the view that an artwork is aesthetically valuable insofar as it affords experiences of a certain kind of pleasure. There's many ways to specify that. But I think from the outset, we should reject the idea that this will account properly for why learning from art seems to be a merit and didacticism a flaw, because there's no necessary connection in any sense between learning and pleasure and didacticism and displeasure. So say the knowledge and understanding gained from works of art might be difficult or painful, such that taking any kind of pleasure in it would be unfitting. So the Pulitzer Prize website described Colson Whitehead's novel, The Underground Railroad, as one that realistically depicts the terror experienced by Black people in the pre-civil rights era. It would be completely unfitting and twisted to actually experience any kind of satisfactory pleasure from feeling or learning these things. So we move on to a more recent view of aesthetic value. So recent work on aesthetic value has shifted from an emphasis on aesthetic experience and towards the kind of active aspect of aesthetic appreciation. The key idea behind these accounts, however they vary, is that aesthetic value is not merely about an artwork's propensity to impart experiences of aesthetic pleasure, but is instead importantly related to the exercise of one's agency. So Thi Nguyen has this view where an artwork is aesthetically valuable to the degree that it fosters aesthetic engagement, so say reflection about the work, trying to form one's own mind about the work, trying to arrive at correct judgments about the work. So the engagement account of aesthetic value definitely provides a superior explanation of why didacticism is an artistic flaw to the hedonist account. And I think this explanation should go a little like this. So didactic art unduly restricts the opportunity for the exercise of our agency in aesthetic appreciation because it imposes or forces a reading, and it thus precludes the exercise of agency that would be involved in trying to make sense of the work for oneself or trying to see from the perspective it presents. It just gives it outright. There's, however, potentially a limit of the solution. You can ask about it in Q&A. I'm not completely sure it works, but the idea is that as it stands, this view doesn't really explain why imparting knowledge and understanding is artistically good, because we could fruitfully exercise our agency in aesthetic appreciation by merely trying to learn from a work, even if it doesn't yield knowledge, regardless of whether we actually succeed. So, for instance, it's notoriously difficult to make sense of David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, yet that we don't know whether one's reasoned interpretation is correct doesn't seem to diminish the value of engaging in that process in any kind of way. So we could say something similar about learning. So although engagement with the work may involve taking up the goal of learning from it, if the value resides in the exercise of agency, it doesn't seem to depend very much on whether we actually learn from the work in the end, or whether we actually achieve this goal. So here's at last my favored solution. The starting point of it is to notice that achievements in general are finally or non-instrumentally valuable. They're valuable not in virtue of leading to something else, but for themselves. So this idea, for instance, has been used all across philosophy, notably to explain the value of knowledge and why it's better than true belief. It's because knowledge is kind of an achievement, and true belief is not. Artworks may be valuable qua artworks, partly in virtue of being achievements. So that's a view that some people have defended. And I think that successfully imparting knowledge might constitute such an achievement. So in particular, imparting knowledge and understanding through art is no small feat when you think about it. So it requires a lot of skill, partly because it involves doing it through media whose proper function is arguably not a didactic one. It requires great creativity and else. So this is kind of, in a nutshell, and provides an explanation for why the ability to impart knowledge and understanding could be an artistic merit. The idea would be that the greater the capacity of an artwork to do so, the greater an achievement it is. But can the achievement account explain what makes didacticism an artistic flaw? So the engagement account, I think, seemed to get something right about didacticism, which is how it precludes a certain kind of engagement with the work on the part of the audience. And notice that often the cognitive content that can be gained from artworks seems to some extent hidden or underdetermined by the artwork itself. It's not already like given in the content of the work, just waiting to be picked up. You could very well walk through Virgo and not ask yourself any questions. You may not be engaging properly with the work, but it doesn't require of you that you ask these questions and that you gain this knowledge. So to a large extent, to acquire knowledge and understanding from an artwork, we as the audience ought to bring something in of our own. So we ought to problematize the work and ask questions of it and apply hypotheses and try to adopt new perspectives. So when an artwork imparts knowledge and understanding in this way, this achievement is not a solitary one. It's not solely the artists or the audiences, as it cannot be solely attributed to either. So it's a collective achievement that involves both the work of the artist, that of other participants, and in this case, there's normally orchestrators moving the frames of the work, as well as the audience. I just want to flag that there's a forthcoming article by Christopher Early, which defends a very similar view of the shared role of artists and audiences in acquiring knowledge through art. And so when we think about didactic artworks, they also seem to preclude from the outset the imparted knowledge and understanding from constituting a collective achievement. And insofar as they do that, we have an explanation of why they're flawed. I do have some worries, even if I like this idea, which is, first, the achievement account may not yield the result that I want, that didacticism is an artistic flaw. It seems to yield the result that it's a merit because it does lead to knowledge and understanding. It's just a lesser one than imparting knowledge and understanding in a non-didactic manner. I'm also worried that the solution of collective achievement may overgenerate collective achievements. Anytime two people are involved in learning to some degree, it seems like the acquisition of knowledge by one of the parties would be a collective achievement. That may be right, but it seems maybe a little bit of a stretch. And I wonder whether ultimately maybe a hybrid account is preferable, so we can explain why imparting knowledge is artistically meritorious because it is an achievement, while explaining why didacticism is a flaw by appealing to the fact that it unduly precludes aesthetic engagement. So thank you so much.